Hi everyone, we are back with a video for the first time in quite a few months. Yeah, I probably should stop taking such long breaks, but I decided to make a video just for fun, I guess, with a review of a movie that I wanted to review a month ago, but decided to wait pretty much just because I wanted to think about it a bit more. When I first watched this movie, I really enjoyed it, but I felt like something was missing, I guess. So let's give a deep dive into The Batman and figure out what was missing or possibly what wasn't missing. Right off the bat, we can see that this movie is actually very similar to The Dark Knight in terms of its own sort of story, I guess. It's based around the same comic story and just features different villains, but a similar approach in terms of its mystery riddle style, I suppose. And honestly, that isn't a bad thing, because The Dark Knight obviously was one of the better Batman movies that we've ever gotten. And this movie follows a really good story within Gotham. My only problem is The Dark Knight already established this world in a previous movie. And when you're watching this movie, you kind of feel like you're missing something, because this world hasn't been established yet. So when the movie starts, it just kind of starts. For some people, this was perfectly fine, but for me, it left me a little bit confused. And also, you revisit the same locations quite a bit in this film, so it makes Gotham City feel kind of small. And the length, well, let's just say sometimes it feels a bit too long, but sometimes too short. Some things are skimmed over a bit, and other things it just feels like are repetitive, I suppose. But the mystery aspect is very entertaining to go through, and well, I enjoyed watching the movie, of course. And while I did enjoy the story, I did enjoy the mystery, and I did, for the most part, enjoy the villain, by the end, the whole thing kind of blows up in your face. And that's not to say that the ending is necessarily bad, it just kind of feels like it falls apart at the end. Very similarly to The Dark Knight, once the Riddler isn't really as involved in the plot anymore, it's kind of questioning why the movie is still going on, and by the end of the film, I was definitely ready for the movie to be over. Which sometimes is good, but in the case of this film was something that I was kind of left with. And those are about the only things I can poke fun of within the story. Well, maybe other than the weird romance that doesn't feel like a romance, but also is at the same time. I feel like they added this subplot just because Catwoman was in the movie, but I don't think that was really well thought through. But yeah, that is all I'm going to say about the story. And honestly, the story is pretty good and leads most of the film. But the thing that is actually the best about the entire movie is very obvious based on the trailers: the cinematography. The shots within this movie are just amazing. I love all of the cinematography that goes all throughout the film. They try their best, and Matt Reeves' directing definitely was, well, the best thing that this movie has for it. The acting as well is pretty good, and there was nothing where I felt kind of overly drawn out by the acting or anything like that. Everything just worked and made sense within the film. And I also really appreciate watching a movie where Batman doesn't kill anyone. This is kind of a small thing now, but seeing Batman kill so many people in recent superhero movies just doesn't make sense at all. And I like that this movie makes sure that he doesn't kill anyone, though he's also overly brutal, which, you know what, that's fine. Something I can also really appreciate about this movie is the music. The main theme is really good, and you'll hear it a lot all throughout this film. But that's kind of the only song that's really good, because the music doesn't necessarily have a lot of variety, but I mean, having a one leading song soundtrack is perfectly fine in my book, so I think that it works. But one thing I will criticize about the film, and probably my biggest criticism, is some of the action. Whenever it goes to a fight scene with Batman, I kind of roll my eyes a bit, because Batman is just overly stiff in this film. The action doesn't really hit as much as I would want it to, and I'm not saying that it needs to be super over the top with each individual fight scene, but a lot of the times it's kind of just Batman taking a shot, holding firm, and then fighting back. It's not super complex, and you don't really see a lot of, I guess, craziness in terms of what you want to see from a superhero film, especially from a more modern superhero film where we're used to getting crazy action scenes, especially over-the-top ones in fighting. And I know that that's kind of a brain-dead thing to complain about, but it's also weird because when the stiff action does come in, it makes everything feel a bit less impactful. Things don't really land as well, and you just kind of have to deal with that. But again, another criticism was the small world. Going back to the same locations is fine, but when you're not introducing me to new characters within these locations, it's also kind of weird. They just keep going deeper and deeper into this nightclub, and well, at first this was fine. I kind of got tired of it by the end, especially when they kept mentioning it over and over and over again, and it felt like the riddle was becoming increasingly obvious, to me at least. And I don't like feeling like Batman is a dumb character, because it doesn't really make sense. But I will say one thing I do like is when the flooding scene happens, Batman at least acts like Batman. He tries to save as many people as possible and is not afraid to, well, get his hands dirty in doing this. He doesn't kill anyone, but still makes sure that everyone is safe, which is something that is a core value that many superhero movies have forgotten. But yeah, I would say overall I still like this film, but I don't really like it as much as when I first watched it. It's still really good, and I still recommend that you watch it if for some reason you haven't seen it already. But in the end, I am going to give Matt Reeves' The Batman a pretty solid 8 out of 10.